everyone. Welcome to At Home with Sally. I'm Sally Clarkson, and I have the biggest privilege in the world to be with so many friends from all over the world who join me every week to listen to my stories, inspiration, biblical encouragement, and I am just so glad that you're here today. Thanks so much for joining me. Hello, my friends. I'm so excited to be with you today. I have a very special guest, and we've had the privilege of meeting each other at a conference that we both enjoy speaking at. And she has written an amazing book that is just really something after my own heart, which you know. And so I hope that you'll welcome with me today Ginny Zurich from 1,000 Hours Outside. Welcome.
I'm so thrilled to be here. The first time I met you, I couldn't even believe that I was meeting you. It was quite surreal. I had a friend, we kind of sat near you after the conference was over, one of the Wild and Free conferences. We both were like, pinch me. We're with her.
And I would have done the same for you. I feel like it's such a fun thing that we get to speak and see all these women and stuff. And that it really is amazing that you would feel that way. I'm sure that when you are going places, you walk down the street and people say, Jenny. Aww. Do people do that to you?
They do. They're so sweet. Yes, it's such an honor. It's surreal. It really is surreal.
It really isn't. It's not a natural thing. I continue to be surprised, but it is a blessing. I just love all the people who are listening to us today.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I'm looking outside, and here, as we were talking a minute ago, 4 deer passed by my front window. I think you and I are both nature lovers. We love outdoors. We could tell so many stories today, but I want to know, obviously people are interested in what you do because your whole site blew up. They love your book. Tell me, when did you conceive of this book and how did it kind of progress? What did it mean to you? I don't know
if I always was a nature lover. Have you always been a nature lover?
I kind of have. At least I can remember back into my teen days. My parents lived near a golf course. And when the sun was setting, I would take my dog and I would go near the golf course and I would walk and dream. And, that was when I didn't have my romantic husband yet, my unromantic husband, actually. And I would just dream about things and I would just get into it. And I loved it until it got dark and then I'd go home. So, yes, I have been a walker for a long time.
Yeah. And I played a lot outside as a kid, but it wasn't my main thing. I think there wasn't as much to do inside. So you did just play outside in the neighborhood. But I like to read. I play the piano. So those are my main things. And I would say, I became a nature lover as a mom because it saved me. And
that's so true. I feel the same way. Mm-hmm. After enough hours inside with all these sweet, wonderful little people, I thought we've got to get outdoors.
Yeah. And I actually didn't know that, Sally. I didn't realize that was available or that kids would be so engaged when we were out there. So I was doing all sorts of inside things and drowning. I was drowning.
Now, why were you drowning? And wait, first I want to go back to something. I want to know about, you play piano?
I do play piano. I've played since I was 4. So,
what kind of piano do you play?
I have a Yamaha, but I grew up classically trained and did all sorts of things. I took lessons at the University of Michigan, and that was my first love. And then, it's a weird thing, Sally. I think back on it, and I taught lessons for 20 years. I taught, and then our youngest daughter was just a little clingy to make that work still. But sometimes you move away from your first love out of practicality. And that's what I did. And I got a math degree. It was more practical. Sometimes I wish if I were to do my life over again, maybe I wouldn't do that. I don't know.
What would you do?
I maybe would have stuck with the music, because I was taking lessons at the University of Michigan, and they've got a world-renowned music school. I was with the head of the music department there, and they didn't take kids. There was me and one other kid that took lessons at the School of Music there, and I didn't go as being practical. I thought, well, what am I going to do with a music degree? And I got a math degree instead. So it's what I think if I could have anything, I would love to have just like thousands of piano students. So that's what I
Really?
love.
So you
Yeah.
don't mind performing?
I don't mind performing. No, I play with my husband in the church band and all sorts of things like that. And we've done it. I mean, with baby strapped, I have a baby strap on my back or baby strapped on the front. And
Wow, we're getting such a new picture of you. Classical pianist who runs outside. I mean,
well, that was the saving grace for me. And what's interesting to me, Sally, is that you knew it intuitively and I didn't know it intuitively, that would save me as a young mom. And even still, my kids are teenagers and we would be running ragged, I think, if we weren't pausing to slow down and intentionally get outside. But when I was a young mom, I was lost.
yeah,
I
I
was
know.
awful at it.
Weren't we all? I mean, I look back now and I didn't know a thing.
Yeah.
For some reason, I fell in love with Sarah when I was holding her. It was like, oh my gosh, it's a baby. I really remember being surprised and then thinking, and she's mine. And oh goodness. And so I fell in love with her, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was afraid I would break her, you know.
Yeah. And I didn't
Interesting.
know how to fill the time. I think that was my hardest part, which was this 10-hour day that looms ahead. If you are a stay-at-home mom and
Right.
if your husband works out of the home, mine did. And so he had a lunch hour. I was like, can you just skip that part? And a commute. So this is a long day that looms ahead. And we had three pretty close together, three under three. But even with just one baby, I felt very lost as to how to structure the day. And
Yeah.
for several years, Sally, I was really down. I didn't enjoy being a mom. And yet I loved kids. I'd always loved kids. I was so excited to be a mom. And so I struggled with those feelings because you only get one chance to do it. And I was so bummed out. And nature, I became a nature lover because it truly did change the whole experience of early childhood, but also my mothering. So I had a friend who told me about Charlotte Mason and that kids should be outside for 4 to 6 hours a day whenever the weather is tolerable, to which I thought that was absurd. And everything we were doing was way shorter. The library program and Music and Me and the Little Kickers soccer and Music in the, all those things are so short. And you
Yeah.
expend a lot of energy. You expend a lot of yourself to get your children there. And then it doesn't take up much of the day and you're exhausted and really spent. And so back in 2011, it's been a long time. We had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old and a baby. And I agreed to go with this friend to a park from 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon, just
Goodness,
grass, bring a picnic lunch, bring a blanket. And that one day changed my life, Sally. I tell people it was the best day of my life because it was the first good day I had as a mom.
oh my goodness. I'm so glad you're saying that. And I'm sure you've said it before, but I think that so many women struggle with guilt because they go from, usually if you don't have children, you're either working or you're doing something else. And then when you have these children, they feel guilty when they get bored or when they think, what am I supposed to do now? Or when the baby says, the little toddler says, play with me again, mommy. And I think that, if we were to be able to look back in history, if somebody was farming outside, they put the little baby on the ground, gave him a couple little toys or whatever, kept their eye on him and did their work. But I do think that women are so isolated now. They don't have that neighbor across the fence. They don't have the grandmother next door. And so there is a lot to be done in 24 hours when you have little children that you think you're supposed to entertain. And I want to know more about, and I kind of want to say right here, and I'm sure you agree, but everybody's story is a little bit different. Different personalities, the different ways that you do it, different places to live. But I think that all the things that we're talking about today filled your home and my home. Just being able to, I would read, I would do, reading time with the kids at the very beginning after we had done devotions. And then I would say, okay, now go outside and play what you just read. And so, from when they were little, they would do Roxaboxen or they would do some little town or city, or they would play, King of the Mountain or whatever. And then they would be tired enough to come back in and do their math.
Sure.
Or whatever. But we were outdoors a lot and we picked our homes so that we could be near some kind of outdoor place that we could go. So I want to ask you a whole bunch of questions. What do you think people are going to say? Are you wasting time? Because you're not using that time intellectually. What do you say to people when they say, Jenny, how do you know that that's a good use of time?
Well, that was the thing that really changed me. So all of a sudden, I had a good day. I'd not had one. I got a chance to catch my breath, to exhale. I always say I felt like Mother Nature mothered me in a season where, I mean, I've got a beautiful, wonderful mother, but our kids were super clingy. I mean, they only wanted me, and for a long period of time. And so you have family maybe that's willing to help, or maybe you are isolated and you don't have any family around, and you feel like there's another mom there. Like the sunshine helps you feel better, and they engage the kid. Mother Nature engages the kids. I mean, this is beautiful. And we changed to start to do things outside just because it was helping me be more present. But my past decade plus has been this journey of learning that when we allow kids to play outside, play freely in a safe spot, this does help their cognition quite a bit, actually. And it helps their emotional health and their social skills and their physical health. And spiritually, God has given us so many of his spiritual laws through nature, simple things that we can teach our kids. And so this is really to help our kids be well-rounded. But my favorite thing about the cognition comes from a book called Smart Moves, which is one of my favorite books. The author is besides yours, the author is Dr. Carla Hannaford. Now, Dr. Carla Hannaford is in her 80s, and she didn't learn to read until she was 10 years old. And I think that's such a beautiful part of her story. She said when she was a kid, it didn't really matter. And here she has a PhD. So just talking about kids and developing on their own timelines. But her book is called Smart Moves, Why Learning is Not All in Your Head. And I think so often we equate learning with sitting. But she gives this statistic, and it's a good one, Sally. Are you ready for it?
Ready.
The statistic is elderly people who dance regularly have a 76% less chance of developing dementia.
I'm getting up. I'm going to get up right now.
We can dance while we talk. But the point is that complex movements enhance the way our brains function, and they protect our brain function. And when kids are given time and space, especially outdoors, nature and the elements and the uneven terrain, all of those things, the child on their inner being wants to do things that are hard, and they progress in small increments. They get a little bit higher. They learn how to climb over the fence and swing a leg. Our teenagers are skateboarding, or we go whitewater rafting, or they go rappelling. So when they're little, it looks like, oh, I'm going to step up on this log and I'm going to try and balance over this stream, those types of things. And that is learning. That's academic cognitive growth. And we live in a world where our kids aren't going to have a job that lasts for 30 years. Those don't exist anymore. They're going to be on their toes a bit. And they're going to have to change and be adaptable and resilient and creative. And those types of things come from our time outdoors and in these environments that are unpredictable, not so much at a desk. And I love that you sent your kids out in the morning, because now they're coming out with all these studies that say morning light in particular resets all these body systems. There's over 100 body systems that are dependent on the day and night cycle. So in terms of our cognition, and that's just one little piece of it, there's the vestibular sense that gets activated when your head is out of an upright position. So what's the life of a kid? I mean, a life of a kid who is unhampered, they're rolling down the hill, right? They're swinging and their head is going back. They're on the merry-go-round. They're doing all sorts of things to get their head out of an upright position. And that's helping with their development.
Well, I was interested. My son Nathan was telling me about a book that he read, or I don't know what it was, but he was saying that there are 7 major kind of geniuses, and only one of them is somebody who is knowledgeable, like academics or whatever. But there's physical, and there's the kind of people who can build anything, and the kind of people who are creative and can make a poem or a music or whatever. And the personalities that we have, which are unique by design, tend to go in the direction of the inner drive that we've been given in order to be excellent. And if you look at all of the vast different things that there are in life, we have to eat. So thank goodness there's people who want to farm, you know what I mean, or garden. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have somebody to come and repair my refrigerator or my whatever. But I think that physical outdoor exercise actually connects a lot of the pathways in our brains,
Yeah.
so that your creative speaks to your vocabulary one, which speaks to your, the more that you can go outside. And then, as you're saying, look at these amazing, and then you can explain what the leaves are, what the flowers are, that there's photosynthesis, that there's carbon dioxide coming out of this, and there's oxygen coming out of that. You're just having fun.
Yeah.
But children love to gather information and to gather skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in nature, it's very cohesive. So we started to think about that with the monarch butterfly. And when we're at Michigan, you can find a lot of milkweed, and we can hatch them in our home. It's really a beautiful thing. And they grow so much, it was X amount of 1,000 times bigger in such a short period of time. And then, here's the spiritual lesson. You are a new creature in Christ, right? The old is gone. Yeah. The new has come. Here's this yellow and green crawling caterpillar that turns into an orange and black butterfly that tastes with its feet and has a proboscis. I mean, no one else is even going to come up with that story. So this is beautiful. But then they travel to Mexico. So you can get a little sticker tag to put on the monarch, and you can follow the journey. So here you can learn you can learn math, and you're learning science, and you're learning geography. You can learn all of these different things through different nature studies too. So on the academic side, there's all that sort of stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also think that I just love your book. I just think it's wonderful. And I have all sorts of other books I think you should write. So after we quit today, for those people who, I think a lot of times people come to home education as we came to our children. They weren't trained. They don't know how to think about it. They're not exactly confident in it. So I think you should write a whole bunch of books about ideas of how to teach your children about butterflies and caterpillars. And you could do a great science curriculum. Okay, so I want to go to another question. Some people aren't used to this. They feel like it's something brand new. Getting their children outside can seem really challenging. Whether it's living in an urban environment, which I lived very much so in Oxford, it can take some planning to go outside, and then there's weather and so on and so forth. How do you best motivate children? Now, I do have to say that the older my kids got, the more they even enjoyed going outside, because we would go on long hikes and climb mountains, and we live in the National Forest area. So there was never a lack of places for us to go. And then, of course, they could always do that with their teen friends, which they really enjoyed. But in general, what are some of the things that you did? I'll throw something out. We do Easter egg hunts all year. We use little plastic colored eggs whenever the kids are totally bored, and they would each get a different color of an egg, depending on their maturity level or how high they could see. But I'm sure you have lots of just fun memories. I look at the pictures of your family, and I want to be in your family. So what are some of the favorite things that you've done? How do you get children outside? You would know.
It is a lot of work, and that's why we have a goal for it. You don't really have goals for the easy things.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
You have goals for the harder things. I mean, we are actually trying to get outside for 1,000 hours in a year, because I would rather be playing the piano or reading a book. So, but I know that this is so beneficial for all of us, and especially in a world that's very technologically advanced and tech heavy. Our kids need to have experiences, analog experiences like we got. They have to have those so that they know that they can depend on those and how those make them feel. So we have a goal. Alistair Humphreys, he's a National Geographic Explorer of the Year, and he has a book called The Doorstep Mile, which I coined that, but he talks about it quite a bit in this book, that the hardest step is the one over the doorstep. And I think that's true when we're talking about trying to get our kids outside, especially when they're little, because you have to do all of it. You have to get on their little gloves, and you've got to make sure that you have an extra set of clothes, because little ones fall, and you've got to have a first aid kit. So for me, the biggest thing, Sally, really was community, that we had 4 or 5 moms that were willing to go outside and be outside for a couple hours. And
now that would be so much fun to have kindred spirits that you can talk with the moms and they can play with the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have an extra set of eyes, and everyone has food, and everyone wants to eat all the kids want to eat each other's snacks. And it just becomes this beautiful thing. And we just did the simplest thing, Sally. We would look for the places that were the easiest. So that would be a park that's really set back from a parking lot, or that might be a half-mile trail with little ones that you're taking them through, and you just go at their pace, and they stop and they want to look at different things, and they like that. What has surprised me is that, like what you said, I think often we think of play and we think of it as something that little kids do. But we've been doing this for over a decade, and we just went outside today with our teens. And it's a parenting strategy that works all the way through being a grandmother.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Things change a lot when you're a parent, and there's not much that you can take from one season to the next. Like, oh, been there, done that. I did the potty training. We went through the picky food stage. And there's always a new thing. There's a new thing that you're struggling with or trying to figure out. But nature, I think, is always there as an option. And I liked what you were talking about with the brain, the pathway. So down the center is the corpus callosum, and we have these two hemispheres of our brain. And when we're learning something new, or when we're stressed out, which happens a lot, part of our brain shuts down. It's 75 to 80% of your non-dominant side. It shuts off. Carla Hannaford talks about this too. So you've got kids that, all of a sudden, maybe if that side of the brain controls the opposite eye, like they have they have a hard time reading, or they have a hard time hearing, or they get clumsy. They're stressed out. And Carla Hannaford says, really, we want to increase these neural pathways that go from one side to the other. And she says the best way to do it is through unstructured imaginative play. This is really valuable. It is definitely a worthy use of our time. And what a gift that we feel better. We make memories. I mean, it's like everything you could ever ask for, all packaged up in one thing.
Well, I think too, as I look, especially even now at my older children who are 40 on down, I can't possibly be that old. But anyway, I feel like something that, and again, I'm focusing on teens because that's well, I haven't been close to teens in years, but we did a lot then. But I think that emotionally, to be able to be out and quiet, and to be able to be away from crowds, and to be away from machines wind you up. They don't unwind you. And we still, in our family, go for these long walks and long hikes. And my son, Joel, who's a composer, sometimes takes every Saturday a 4 or 5 mile walk. And he said that's when his ideas start spinning. That's when he will see the sunset, or all the different animals that are there. And he said it literally creates a whole new kind of series of imaginative songs and photography that is soothing to him and is emotionally affirming, and it's also a part of his job. But he discovered it on his own. And I think that there's so many, I think it's almost easy to think, well, we're going to go outside. Now, which activities are we going to do outside? Mm-hmm. Instead of just letting kids go according to their personality and letting them explore and letting them give them something to write down thoughts that they've had when they've seen, the blue jays out on the pine or whatever. It doesn't matter. But there's no right way to do it. Is that right?
Oh, I agree. It doesn't have to be hard. I think you do just go. And I have written an activity book, but that's because that's what the publisher wanted me to write. And when I made it, I did remember these simple activities. You can make these mud pies. It's so much fun. But for the most part, we would just go, and the kids would play, and they would use their imagination. And there's this woman named Angela Hanscom who wrote a book called Balanced and Barefoot, and she's a pediatric occupational therapist. That's one of my favorite books too. She says sometimes it can take kids up to 45 minutes to figure out how they're going to play. And so we just have to kind of breathe through it, I think. And that gives them the chance to be creative and to figure out, to come up with something out of nothing, to negotiate with the other kids that are there, to compromise, to learn how to use their voice but not be too bossy, all of those skills that are really important. That's all happening outdoors. So for the most part, we just did really simple things. We lived in the Metro Detroit area. We still do. And we would just kind of pop around to the different playgrounds, the different parks, from here, there, try this one, try that one. and just this commitment to stay a little bit. And the kids eventually would fall into a rhythm of, they're building a little fort, or they're trying to make this mud soup, and it's just precious. And you get to have a conversation with a friend and catch your breath and relax, and everyone feels better. And it does more for you. I mean, you would think, how could this be so impactful? And yeah, it really is. It impacts everyone from the oldest to the youngest. You take your baby out there, there's so much for them to see. And I think if you live in a city, what's interesting is no matter where you live, there's pros and there's cons. So there's a man named Dan Buettner who studies this thing called the blue zones, where people live to be in their hundreds. And so one of his biggest things is to live in a walkable city. That's one of his biggest things that you could do.
I agree. Yeah.
Right? But so if you live in a city, actually, that's really beneficial. You can walk to the park, you can walk to the library, you can walk to go pick up your groceries, but maybe there's not as much nature, right? Maybe there's no forest. Or if you live in a subdivision, well, there's probably a lot of kids you could play with, but you don't have the walkability and you don't have the farm animals. And then if you live out rurally, well, you have those things. Maybe you've got a little bit of acreage, maybe you've got a pond, but there's no one to play with. So, I mean, no matter where you live, there's going to be pros and cons. And I think you embrace those things and try and expose your kids as you can to the other types of places, and know that there's benefit to all of it.
That's so true. I formed a couple of groups, some friends and I did, and every Friday we would go. We found out that the National Park Service gives out things to color, things to find, things to do, trails to walk, and so we would travel around to different national parks together and have the forester give us be the guide. Wow. And talk to us about things, and then we'd have a picnic lunch. But it was fun because the kids don't want to be inside all the time. They want to get out. They want to be with their friends. But I'm telling you, even when you don't think they're listening, they come home with so many stories and with so much vocabulary. You've got to promise to send me all these books, and I'll put them online when we
Sure.
With this. But I want to talk about this before we run out. I love Until the Streetlights Come On. I think that's an amazing book. Tell us about that.
It's a book I wanted to write for a very, very long time, because I think that the common thread is that play is old-fashioned, and that play isn't a worthy use of our time anymore.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Because there's all these other things you could be doing. There's so many lessons that your kids could be in, and so many courses that they could take. But when we take a step back and examine the type of world that we're launching our kids into, we're launching them into one that's rapidly changing. And that's pretty fun and exciting. And the statistics say things like, by 2035, 75% of people will be entrepreneurs. And that's a really high percentage. Or people will have a bunch of different jobs that they're juggling. And we're already seeing things like that. So we're trying to set our kids up for a rapidly changing world. And this is a message of hope. That's what the book is. It's a message of hope that we can do less and gain more for our kids. It doesn't have to be a rat race. It can really be this feeling of yesteryear in terms of the play and the boredom, where life wasn't so full. There was so much space. There were so many afternoons and summer days where we're not going to camp. We're not going to this lesson. You're just home and you're figuring out what you're going to do. And that helps the kids' bodies release the neurotoxins. Kim John Payne talks about that in Simplicity Parenting, that when we have downtime, our bodies release neurotoxins. He's like, kids should be prescribed to play several times a day. It helps you calm down. So Until the Streetlights Come On is a phrase that people used to say, that when they were a child and they weren't part of this digital age, that when they were a child, they knew that when the streetlights came on, it was time to go home. And their childhood was filled with a lot of freedom. They weren't wearing a GPS watch. Their mom didn't know where they were. And they had this general thing of when to go home. And they had all this freedom and play and neighborhood play built in. And those are still the types of things that will prepare our kids for the world that they're heading into. So it's a message of hope that we don't have to sacrifice today for the sake of tomorrow.
Oh, you are just brilliant. I just can't believe all you've read. And that really, I think, encourages all of us who haven't had the chance to read as much about it, to be able to rely on something authoritative. Well, I just even think my grandchildren are very natural. They have a million toys and they play inside, outside, running. But going along with what you said, I think that when they get to play real life, which is really a funny thing, but when they'll play that they're mommy and daddy, or when they'll play that they're cooking, or when they play, it actually passes on moral values. They said that when children see models of people who are living the right way, we're going to pray together today. We're going to wash the dishes together. We're going to do whatever. We're going to go on this walk. Let's go take some cookies to our neighbor down the street. And children take those natural, realistic things in as these are the ways that I should live, because this is how I've lived my whole life growing up. And I just almost watch their little brains grow when they're outside, when they're with people, when they're collecting things, when they're pretending to be, I have, my daughter has 4 children, 5 and under. And just watching them outside, and they each take turns with little Eleanor, who's the baby, oh, don't let her fall. Oh, watch out for this. Oh, don't let her put that in her mouth. But where have they learned that? It's from being together in a community where they're practicing real life, and that real life, when our children are just entertained to death inside by machines and by clever games, they aren't practicing real life. They're not developing a sense of virtue just because they're having to be together. They're not cooking together, making cookies, or having a lemonade stand outside and running down the street. And, but anyway, just a thought there. But
let's camp there for 1 minute, because I want to say this. I think this is really important, because you have a lot of moms that are listening that are like your daughter, probably. They have 4 kids under 5. And I think when you start to have these extra children, you feel guilty. I remember feeling guilty. Like, you give your first kid so much attention, and then here comes the next one and the next one, and you're so much more spread thin. So there may be a mom that's listening that's in that stage, or got all these little kids, and you feel spread thin. And my mother-in-law always said, they got more people to love them. They got all these siblings. But I read recently this book by Michelle Borba called Unselfie, about raising empathetic kids. Oh. And you just said that when they're all together, they're noticing the baby, and they're learning how to be empathetic and to really see how other people are feeling just by having that baby there. And it's such a gift. Here's the story, Sally. So this Michelle, she's wrote this book, and she was talking about how they'll sometimes do this in the schools as a program. They'll bring in a baby so that the kids can start to learn empathy. So if you are at home and you've got that baby and you are struggling to stay above water, this is actually like curriculum that other people, they bring in. But there was this beautiful story, Sally, she said, where there was this one student who was in middle school, a young man, young guy, a young boy. He's not a young man, 10, 11, 12. And he just had a really hard life, and they couldn't really get through to him, and he was struggling. And they bring in this baby, and everyone is looking at, how's the baby doing? Just like your grandkids, right? How's the baby? And the session ended, and they're kind of like, where's the baby? And they found that this young boy was in the corner. He's holding the baby, rocking the baby. And he said this, Sally, he said, if no one has ever loved you, can you still be a good father?
Oh, and that was in his heart. That was a desire that he naturally had
and the baby brought that out. And so sometimes I think we look at our circumstances and we think, this is awful. My kids are hardly getting, this show of attention, and it's a little chaotic. But there are really benefits woven in there. And you brought it up just in a side conversation to say, they're all outside and they're all paying attention to the baby. And that's a really beautiful part of mothering. It matters.
It does. There's so many of these little jewels that you kind of collect over the years that eventually you go, oh my goodness, I wish I could do it again so I could do it even better. And yet they're made to be satisfying to us, to our souls. Well, I want everybody to find you. So tell me, are you speaking anywhere in the next few weeks? And then number 2, where can they find all your materials? And number 3, are there any other resources that you all have put together that that people could benefit from?
Oh, you're so sweet. I am not creative like how your family is. So all of our things are called 1,000 Hours Outside. So our website has got these free tracker sheets. We actually keep track of our time outside, which to some is cumbersome. So skip it if it's cumbersome. But to some, it's really celebratory. And in our family, it keeps us consistent. And it's also modeling to our kids how to fill your life with what you want to fill it with first and leave the leftover time for screens, not the other way around. So there's a lot of things there. There's kickoff packs, and we have a podcast too. It's called the 1000 Hours Outside Podcast. So everything's the same. Pretty easy to find. Pretty easy to find. Oh, I'm speaking of Wild and Free in April in California. People should come. I've actually never been to San Luis Obispo. Is that how you say it? It's a cool name. And we're going to go tide pooling and possibly kayaking with otters. So
so you're bringing your family.
I'm bringing our oldest daughter. So sometimes we divide and conquer. So we have got some plans when we get out there, and I speak definitely at some of the other conferences that happen in the spring. Because I love meeting all the moms, and it's really so special. You're the one that has the line that snakes through the building. So that's always fun to see too. I love that. And this has been such an honor to be here with you. I could have never in my wildest dreams imagined this. So
well, me too. I
adore you.
Grateful for you. I just think you're so excellent at everything you do, and you're the best podcaster. But anyway, thank you so much for being with us today. And do you care if I just pray for all these precious women? Pray with me for these wonderful people.
Yes, sure.
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you that you have created our lives to be fulfilling and sustaining, and to just really to stir up in us a sense of adventure and a sense of wonder. And I pray that many people will be encouraged today, that they will find a new joy in exploring the outdoors, and that they will see your fingerprints there. Pray your blessings on precious Ginny and all that she's doing, and the ways that she is so enthusiastic and inspiring wherever she goes. Bless her and keep her, and thank you for this time together. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I hope you've enjoyed our time together today and that you'll join me next week. Be sure to look for more inspiration on my blog at sallyclarkson.com. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.